Can you imagine Lewis Hamilton leading Monza with a Ferrari that seemed stagnant weeks ago? The impossible has just happened. What saw Ferrari in Monza that no one else saw? Stay, because what you are about to discover could redefine the 2025 World Cup. The roar of the SF25 crossed the sky of Monza as if the story had decided to turn unexpectedly in favor of Ferrari. In such a symbolic layout for the Italian team as Monza, known worldwide as the Temple of Speed, the figure of Lewis Hamilton leading the timetable with a Ferrari looked like a postcard taken from a tifosi fantasy. But it was not fiction. It occurred. And the raw data was as devastating as revealing. A time of 1:20,117 in the first free training session, which positioned him at the top ahead of his partner Charles Leclerc, separated by only 169 thousandths. It was as if the car and the pilot had found an intimate connection with the asphalt. And it was not a spontaneous coincidence. Loic Serra, Ferrari technical chief, had made a very punctual brake exception in the development of the car. Although the team had decided to freeze the evolutions of the SF25 to focus on other areas of the championship, Monza was the only circuit for which a specific work was authorized. Not by whim, but by conviction. Monza is more than a circuit for Ferrari. It is a national symbol. It is sacred territory. And that was noticed. The way in which the SF25 behaved on the track unleashed a mixture of astonishment and confusion in Ferrari engineers themselves. No one expected such efficiency level, peak speed and curve stability with so few changes introduced. The car looked like another. And Hamilton, far from looking as someone in the process of adaptation, drove as if he had been dressed in red for years. This moment, this first place in free training, may seem insignificant in terms of points, but in terms of narrative, it was an earthquake. The world of Formula One not only saw Hamilton in front, he saw Ferrari renacer. And he did not from the strategy, not from chance, but from a precise technical execution, from a surgical preparation for a single appointment. Monza. What Hamilton and Ferrari achieved that Friday is more important than timesheets can count. It was a message, not only to Red Bull, McLaren or Mercedes. It was an internal message, to his own fans, to its own mechanics, to the skeptics. A message that said, we are not over. The real secret behind Hamilton's leadership in Monza was not in his piloting, although that was decisive, but in what Ferrari managed to do with the SF25 in terms of pure engineering. What was seen on Italian asphalt was not just speed. It was a technical adaptation masterpiece in an environment with very particular demands. And to understand the reason for Ferrari's domain that Friday, you have to enter the details of the aerodynamic package that even surprised the team's own technicians. Monza is a radically different circuit from the rest of the calendar. Long lines, aggressive chicanas and intense braking make this track an extreme exam for any car. Here, what matters is not how much aerodynamic load can generate a car, but how much resistance can eliminate without sacrificing stability. The key is to find a perfect balance between peak speed and braking behavior, and that is precisely what Ferrari achieved, almost against all prognosis. Ferrari arrived at the grand prize with a clear and brave approach. Despite having paused the general development of SF25 in June, the team prepared two rear spoilers for Monza. The first was an evolved version of the package of the previous year, tested in sessions with Pirelli. The second, on the other hand, was a completely new and much more extreme proposal, built specifically for this circuit. And it was this second configuration that transformed the car. The philosophy behind the design was radical, minimizing aerodynamic resistance even if that meant risk stability. To achieve this, Ferrari implemented an ultra-minimalist configuration of the rear wing, practically flat, which barely generated load. At first glance, the wing seemed subdimensive, almost insufficient for any other layout, but here in Monza that was precisely the intention. The other key component was the adjustment of the car height with respect to the ground. Ferrari lowered the SF25 to the limit of the regulation, seeking to work with the so-called soil effect. This technology, based on the air channeling below the car to generate suction, was optimized by extremely precise adjustments in the rake and the stiffness of the chassis. The more flat and stable the car circulates on a smooth surface like Monza's, the greater the performance of the soil effect, and that translates directly into straight speed without the need to depend on the spoiler. But that was not all. Telemetry sensors showed that braking efficiency also remained within ideal margins despite aggressive configuration. Thanks to a micro-adjust work in the distribution of pesos and in the mapping of the energy recovery system ERS, Ferrari made the car stable even in the most critical curves, such as the variant of the rectifilo or the parabolic. That combination allowed the pilots to stop later and accelerate before, maintaining a clean passage line without losing control. And if we talk about energy efficiency, the SF25 also showed important advances. On a track where aerodynamic drag can be translated into greater fuel consumption and lower efficiency of the hybrid system, Ferrari found an optimal area of operation in its power unit. Internal simulations showed that Hamilton could complete a long batch without penalizing its rhythm by energy management, which is vital in the face of an effective classification or career strategy. What happened that Friday in Monza was no accident. It was the result of a specific engineering for a specific objective, to return Ferrari the glory in his flagship circuit. The surprising thing is that they have achieved it with a car that, a week earlier, was considered unstable and unreliable. The transformation was so obvious that even the rivals began to study the data shared by the FIA to understand what Ferrari did different. In a championship as tight as that of 2025, where aerodynamics is everything and each point counts, Ferrari not only understood the game, he dominated him for a day. And that day, Lewis Hamilton, in his second red skin, was the perfect spearhead to demonstrate what the SF25 can be when his entire technical potential is exploited. What happened in Monza was not simply a good training session. It was a manifestation of something much deeper, more symbolic and more decisive for the future of the championship. A change of narrative. What seemed, until a week ago, a team trapped in its own technical confusion, became a team that not only responds to pressure, but makes it opportunity. And in the center of that transformation is Lewis Hamilton. When a seven-time world champion dresses up for the first time in Ferrari's Italian cathedral, he is not just driving a car. He is carrying a legacy. It is being observed not only by engineers but by millions of tifosi, by the press, for the critics who questioned their decision to leave Mercedes, and by the rivals who expected a slow and painful adaptation. But Hamilton not only adapted, it imposed. And that completely changes the meaning of this Friday in Monza. The result did not deliver points. He did not define grill. He decided nothing in numerical terms. But symbolically, everything changed. Ferrari was not leading any training. I was leading in Monza, with Hamilton, after having failed loudly in Zandvoort. And that, in Formula One, has an incalculable weight. This sport not only lives as victories, live from signals. And what Ferrari showed on this first day was one of those signs that resonate throughout the paddock. But there is another even deeper meaning in what we saw. It is not just that Ferrari has taken a step forward. It is that Hamilton, in his second home, finally showed what it means to be in total car control. There were no doubts, there were no hesitant adjustments, there were no complaints by radio. There was conviction. There was a pilot who, after only 3 weekends with his new team, seems to have found the common language with the car. Something that in Mercedes took years to refine and that here, incredibly, is emerging in record time. And that raises a new question in the air. Was this only a peak of circumstantial performance or the real beginning of a serious threat by Ferrari and Hamilton for this championship? Because if the answer is the second, then the 2025 board has just changed completely. For rivals, what was seen in Monza should be an alarm. Because if Hamilton manages to maintain this level of adaptation and Ferrari manages to repeat this technical formula in similar circuits such as Azerbaijan, Canada, or even Spa, then we do not talk about a good day of training. We talk about a sports war fart. And for the tifosi, this Friday was a sigh of relief. After years of frustrations, unfulfilled promises, to see their pilots suffer while McLaren and Red Bull dominated, seeing Hamilton in front was more than a good time. It was tangible hope. For the first time in a long time, Ferrari was not only fast, it was precise, it was intelligent, and it was competitive without the need for pretexts. Because Monza, for Ferrari, is not a simple circuit. It is a mirror. And this year, finally, the reflection returned an image that was worth looking. And that image had Lewis Hamilton at the top. Everything we saw in Monza can be interpreted as a simple momentary sign, a burst of wind in favor, or it can be something much deeper. It can be the spark that starts a storm. Because when Hamilton leads, when Ferrari responds, and when they both do it in the most symbolic circuit of the calendar, the implications are too great to ignore them. The question that is floating now is simple, but loaded with uncertainty. Was this an isolated flash, or are we witnessing a new dominant chapter in Ferrari's recent history? Can Hamilton really, in his first year dressed in red, alter the established order and break with the technical domain that McLaren and Red Bull have been exercising for more than a year? There are no definitive answers. There is still a championship ahead. And what seems promising today, tomorrow could fade with a bad strategy or an error in boxes. But that is the fascinating thing about Formula One. Does not reward who begins stronger, but who knows how to evolve, adapt and resist. Therefore, I leave the open question. Do you think this performance of Hamilton and Ferrari in Monza is only a product of a perfect configuration for this circuit? Or are you convinced that we are facing a pair capable of changing the story of this 2025? Leave it to the comments.